Hello, lovelies. Welcome to my world of beauty and glamour and things that make you think and look at the world differently. If you're a regular here, I'm so glad you're back. And if you're new, please hit subscribe so you can join this fabulousness that is unfolding. This particular video is an excerpt from a teaching class I did within my Lavish Focus group. A lavish focus is where we spend 23 days to a month putting all our attention and all our energy and pointing all our tools at one needle moving outcome. I'm sharing it with you, two reasons. Firstly, because this analogy is just far too good and too useful to be kept backstage. And secondly, because I promised that I wouldn't only do the stuff I can get optimized for. This will find you if it's for you. And if it does, welcome. And if you want to know more, the links are all in the notes. Right, settle in. Let me teach you something.
You've heard me talk about the label and the jar. I have said many times, you cannot read the label when you are inside the jar. The most important deepening of this aspect, as I have contemplated it, is to realize that the label is not always, and in fact, it is seldom created intentionally. If you take the jar analogy, you, the contents that are you, all your paradoxes and your traumas and your blisses and your desires and your disappointment, it is the jar of you. The label is how others perceive you. It's how they read you. The label on the outside of the jar of you is your personal brand. When we talk branding in business and stuff, this is what it is. It's how you are perceived. Long before branding became a marketing concept, it was an agricultural practice. It was farmers heating up an iron stamp. This idea just makes me chrol because, and chrol is a South African word for shudder. My lineage shows up in the weirdest times. So farmers would heat an iron stamp and press it into the hide of cattle. It's not as decoration, it's identification. It's so that when they look at the cattle, they know who it belongs to. They know its lineage. They know all about it from the outside, right? Obviously, a brand on cattle, for example, doesn't say when the cow last was milked or when she last had a calf or whether that bull has sired some award-winning something or other, right? It doesn't say that. It only says from the outside. It doesn't say anything about the insides. This is important. So the mark told people who the cattle belonged to, where they came for, and the standard that they represent. That was also part of the mark. But the brand was never self-assigned. It was always assigned. It was never self-declared. It's not the cow saying this. It's the farmer saying this is who you are. And centuries later, when we're doing online marketing, the principle really hasn't changed much. Your brand today is still your reputation. It's what you are known for. It's the impression that you leave behind. And you shape it through how others experience you. And that starts from day one. When you are born, if you're experienced as cute and cuddly, people respond warmly to you. If you're experienced as awkward or pushy or too much, people will have responded differently. If you were perceived as an inconvenience or a money trap, you will have adjusted your contents of your jar because of that label. In those days, in the early days, the responses to your label directly influence your survival. And so you tailor your label and your brand and your presentation accordingly. You become as accommodating as you can because people like people who are accommodating, right? Even if you've got really strong opinions over here, maybe you learn not to say them quite so much. So when you're looking at this, the label says accommodating, but the jar is full of opinions and boldness and stifled words that are driving them crazy. If you happen to have a diagnosis of late autism or neurodiversity, you will know this particularly. That label is what we call masking. This is how we cope. So you tailor your brand for your survival in those days. And what I know is that as we get older, we put up with that less. We get up to here. Because what happens is the world reads the label first, right? Not everybody in the world is going to bother about the contents of the jar. So you get perceived as this, you get reacted to as this, and you have to keep coping with people who perceive you and react to you as this. And eventually we go, enough. And we rip the label off and we go, here's what's actually in the jar. And people go, I don't know you anymore. I don't recognize you. I don't know who you are. This is how the label jar thing has deepened for me. I traced this in my contemplations all the way through from why I used to refuse to allow people in my theatrical community. People used to come to my parties and they all knew the number one rule was no blonde jokes. Do you remember in the 80s, the blonde jokes? They were everywhere. And I took them all personally because what I knew was my blonde hair was giving them a label that was inaccurate. And they kept amplifying it with attention and laughter. That was my first stand. No blonde jokes. I do not find them funny. They are not accurate. And you wouldn't do this for a person of color. And you wouldn't do this for a Jewish person. And you wouldn't do this for somebody that you knew had a particular, something like a stammer. You don't tell jokes around stammering to somebody who has a stammer, right? So that was the thing. I wanted my label very clear that this is who I am. And what did they do? They slapped another label on that says she's a bitch. Of course, right? You know. So this is what happens. Part of our work, it happens, I think, organically as we age, is bringing our label into coherence with the jar. And in my experience, the lavish focus invitation, the prompting, the thing that says, you need to pay attention to this, is part of that coherencing. I don't think that's a word, but nonetheless. In my tunnel vision, the label that I had been wearing said, she follows directions. She has done since she was 5. She's brilliant. Give her a direction, she'll follow them. That was my whole theatrical career. Directors loved me. When I moved to Starbucks, my in-charge people loved me because they would show me how to make a drink one time and I would follow directions. Now suddenly I'm an entrepreneur and I'm having to pay for directions, or I can get them from the internet, but the internet has this choir of competing directions and I have no idea what I'm doing. So the label I wore for a long time was student, learning, etc., etc. It wasn't until The Secret in 2006 when I decided I was going to just deviate a little bit from the label and do my own acting as if thing. I was going to put my own label here that says, oh, you need set design and you need wardrobe and you need a... And suddenly my label that people could see was reflecting something accurate in my jar that I had kept hidden. When suddenly I said, oh, and I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and people went, wait, what? No, we don't know how to do that. Can you show us? Then I've got a new label that says somebody who knows how to nest magically. So when people come into my world, now suddenly they only wanted to know about nesting. And I'm going, but it's who you have to be as you nest. When Marie Kondo came, and everybody's going, I'm throwing out everything, I'm decluttering to the minimum. And I'm going, and what if you're a maximalist? What if your jar says you need a gallery wall and not just one picture? What if the contents of your jar thrive like a bacterial culture? The medium for your growth is a lot of stuff, is extra. That's the contents of your jar. Now you slap a minimalist label on it, and you've got incoherence again. But if somebody has had situations where they haven't been able to get rid of anything, and their jar actually is very minimalist, but the label is, she's got a lot of stuff. You've got incoherence again, right? The satisfaction that comes from having a label that accurately reflects your jar is life-altering. If you are neurodiverse, if you have a hidden, I don't want to say disability, if you have a hidden thing that makes coping harder, you can bet your bottom dollar that your label says something different to what's in the jar. It must have for you to have got this far. And your lavish focus in making your outsides come into coherence with your insides, and vice versa. Because sometimes there's a thinking error. There's an inside the jar thing that says, my label is inaccurate. Paula and I have had this conversation for ages. She will reflect something about my brilliance, and I'm sitting here going, yeah, I don't see that. It's like, really? Really? And at one point, my question from myself to myself was, what if Paula is seeing the jar accurately? And you've just got the wrong label because you've spent so long behind a label that says, you don't know enough yet, or you're not a proper witch. Can't tell you how many times my future self has jumped up and down about that, because I don't do the spit and crossroads thing. I do eyeliner and lashes and decoration. This is where I believe your prompting for a lavish focus has come in. There is something in you that says, either we need to tweak the contents of the jar, in which case I know I'm thinking this, and I need to stop. Or there's something on the outsides, and you know it's not accurate. This is how we get to bring ourselves into alignment in ways that the light and magic people don't talk about. It is true alignment, outsides and insides in coherence. And I know each of you has a place where your insides are being misrepresented on the outside, but I see stuff on the outside that you are not believing, you have not taken in on board on the insides. And so this is the work.
Well, there we have it. a whole new lens to look at the world through. Your personal brand, your business brand, the label that is outside the jar of you. If this is singing for you, if you're leaning in going, ooh, I want more of that, then my STAR program is the next perfect step. If you decide to work a little closer, then Leading Lady Coaching is where you get my eyes on your everything. And STAR is actually included in that. It's quite likely that there will be a Lavish Focus coming up or a 23 days devoted to something delicious. So if you join my email list, you'll get first dibs and first announcements on all of that. Thank you for being in my world. I am Jacqueline Gates, the fairy godmother you didn't know you had.